I'm back after fully completing Ara Fell because it was so awesome I couldn't stop. My verdict, I will bestow the greatest honour upon this game, Dr. Snap Sprite Edit. Golly, these vampires look spiffy, let me try too. Yippee! Random screenshots of this man who has, like, Dr. Snap's exact coat. I did not find this guy until after I'd already made the custom Dr. Snap sprite, so I could have saved myself a lot of trouble. This game is chunky as heck. It's like the most content-rich one I've played on the entire everything. How long to beat says is like 16 to 23 hours, depending on if you go for full completion. I didn't even go for full completion. I was verging on 30 hours by the end because I had so much fun. Like, my playthrough probably went longer than expected because I really like the way they handled open world in this game. It's almost like developer-supported sequence breaking. Every time a chapter opens up, it'll always open up a little bit more than what you actually need for the plot. You can go ahead a little further to areas that won't be part of a story until later. You can just walk straight into high level areas and like have all these amazing extra challenges and difficulty and stuff. I enjoyed it more than regular grinding. I found it so much more fun and engaging in gameplay to like handle grinding by, instead of it taking a really long time, it being like faster but much more difficult. You could run into an area which is way over level to you, and like if you had the skill to survive like one battle, you'd get just enough experience to get a little bit stronger to maybe survive 2 battles, and then you'd be able to come out of it like at the level you wanted from fighting like at level 5, level 25 enemies and stuff like that. It's so, I really like it. It reminds me of what I liked about Pokemon Legends Arceus. I really liked the challenge of like having that one really high level Snorlax. That was my enemy. I had to beat that before I progressed on from the first tutorial area. I like that when games do that. Specifically, I like when they do that and you actually get rewarded for it, because I have a beef against the T-Rexor in Final Fantasy VIII, which is like a really hard boss in like the first tutorial area, and you don't really get very much if you actually defeat it. Like you get like a mildly larger amount of experience than a regular enemy, and that's just about it. It's not even like significantly enough that it would make sense to scale for the level it actually is. But here, it really is like that. Like you beat this level 20 enemy at level 5, you will be going up to level 10. You don't like instantly become the same rank as the enemy once you defeat it, but you get enough that like it significantly improves your progress for the actual main story. So it was always paying off for me to take detours from the main story and to go off and fight 5 chapters away from Now's story without the story. It was just, it's really cool. And then there was so much like you could revisit previous areas with like new traversal methods. It was just there was like hidden bosses. There's one really strange quest. It was like an early level quest where like what the quest giver actually tells you to do is to go fetch an item, and the item is not actually in the treasure chest. The item is just on the floor in the room next to the treasure chest. If you actually click on the treasure chest, you get like a super rare, out of nowhere, like ridiculously over-leveled boss. It's like a trick. Like you can easily, like you think, oh, this quest is like impossible at this level, but no. If you just ignore what seems like the objective and you walk around, you'll see that your actual objective is right there, and you can actually complete this quest early on in the game and get the early game rewards. But there's a whole secondary reward if you want to return and go actually take out that boss, and you get really good experience for it. I also really loved how so many of the bosses were set up that you could actually take them down at a lower level by like really careful, clever usage of like the skill system and optimizing and changing up different stats and stuff. You can like choose to assign your stat points after level up, and you can reset them at any time for a price. It's really good, and it encourages you to play around with it. Another thing I really liked is how like the economy of the game like affects how your playstyles can be different during different points of the game. Early on, you get the upgrade things for actually upgrading your skills like way early before you actually get the ability to change class and be able to upgrade your skills. So you're like, oh, what's this? Oh, it sells for a lot of money. I'm going to sell it now because I really need these healing items. Then later on, once you actually get to switch the class, like, oh my god, those are really valuable. I should not have sold them. And it's almost great. It has a buyback function in the shop, so you can actually go back and get them back. But now you have to pay the expensive amount that you got back from them. It's like you took out a loan on the future of getting a bunch of money now to get beneficial items, and now you have to pay it back to get back the item that you need now. And then what's extra interesting is like once you've actually upgraded all of your skills, like you'll have no use for those items, and then you can actually sell them and you can actually use it. Like I got to a point where like eventually once I like for most of the game I was trying so hard to like upgrade things faster than I was intended. Like, oh, what can I do to get hit, like to get more of this like limited supply crafting item to upgrade things early, and it was really engaging. And I felt really good, and I was rolling into chapter 2 of like chapter 4 weapons and stuff like that. It felt so good. But then the problem is like the fact that I was engaging with every single side quest and like going to every corner in the open world constantly meant that by the time that it ran out of content, it's like, oh, now I just have to finish the rest of the game, and it's like piss easy. It was a bit of a shame. The final boss was like the easiest boss in the entire game, because I'd already been fighting things like obvious equivalent difficulty in chapter 2, because I had so much fun like barreling ahead. That is the only thing. That it's also fun and unique in its own way about how it gives you a sense of power. It's like, now I finally, like, I've run out of all the upgrades, like, I'm at my maximum level. The only way I can upgrade now is I can stock up on loads of healing. I spent the start of the game buying lots of healing items, but I spent the rest of the game like, oh my god, I need to save all my money for these upgrade things, and not using any healing items at all. At the end of the game, I was like, now I can sell all my leftover upgrade things. I can buy like a shitload of healing items and shove them to everyone's face and become even more all-powerful. And it felt great to be able to completely destroy the final boss super easily, even though it would feel like a letdown in any other game. In this, it felt like I was genuinely being rewarded for like investing so much time into mastering the game. What's even better is that the game has selectable difficulty modes. I was having this great experience just going on normal, and like how this extra optional difficulty within the game worked with normal. But if you can set the actual difficulty itself up too, and all those extra challenges become even more extra challenging. It's interesting how, like, depending on difficulty, it's more required to go into the extra challenges to even get to that level of power. Like the level of power I had at the final boss would be like necessary to actually defeat it if you went on the higher levels. It's so good. Like, they've really went great effort into balancing like everything to be really good, because that's also the good thing. Is like, if you're playing on normal difficulty, side stuff like I was doing is totally optional. Basically, you can choose either like regular grinding, boring grinding, repeating the same level enemies that have no challenge over and over again, or you can choose to do what I did, the crazy grinding, run off to the big high level area and like beat up one guy and go up 10 levels. So if you do actually just totally skip all the optional stuff, you'll eventually get to those areas later on in the plot anyway, and you'll get to them at the actual intended level where you're supposed to be able to take them on. It fascinates me that like two people could play this game and get a totally wildly different experience of like one area being, oh, the worst, hardest part of the game, and oh, the easiest part of the game. It's because the game is so well balanced. No matter what you choose to play, you will be able to finally beat it. There is no unbeatable, there is no stopping point, there is no unfairness. It is difficult, but it's challenging in a way that can be completed. I felt so fucking proud for beating that optional pirate boss guy back before I even got more than one party member. I just, when I came back to it, I was like, oh yeah, it would have been really easily even if I waited for when I was supposed to. But I had a new and unique experience because I didn't do what I was supposed to. And the fact is, it is what you're supposed to. The game expects every possible different way you could play it, and you have a unique and well-balanced, interesting gameplay for it. It's so good. Also, the maps in this game are fucking massive. There is so much backtracking and re-exploring and like reopening new areas of new exploration modes because the maps are massive. It's really detailed pixel art. There's so much like animated elements all over the maps. There's so many things like hiding places and secret, like, that's the only complaint I had about it, is for some reason one of the many traversal methods, the on-map indicator for it wasn't very clear for me. Sometimes you can blow up a wall with bombs, and for me, for the life of me, I could not tell when a wall was bomb-uppable unless it was on very specific types of wall tile. The black crack was supposed to show it's bombable. When it's in a cave tile, I could not tell at all. It blended in with the regular cave tile. So I do, that's my one criticism, is like in caves in particular, which is like the place you most frequently have to bomb things. Maybe you could have like made the contrast a bit higher on that, because it like the actual wall you're going on is like it's brown, but it already has like dark contrast on it. So I just thought like that's not a crack, that's just part of a shading. Also, sometimes having so many alternative traversal methods, it's hard for me to say that. Having so many different things to watch out for in the map gets a bit overwhelming. I'm like, oh, maybe that place over there was actually a new area I could get into. I forgot you can crouch, because you can also swim, because you can also bomb up walls, you can also jump, you can also climb, you can also turn into a magical light orb and fly around at super speed to find other fairy rings you can land on. It's like, there is so much good stuff. Also really appreciate that all of these traversal methods are just activated by like going over and clicking on the thing instead of having to go in the menu like old school HMs. Like, this game is really good at being a good classic old school JRPG, but like better. It doesn't have as many of the problems as old school JRPGs did. Like, the only problem I have is that the fast travel is quite limited. There is fast travel, but it's only like you can travel in a town by going to the specific object which takes you to another town. You can't like go for the menu and like once you're deep in a dungeon there's no option to like teleport out of a dungeon, so every time you do like beat a difficult boss at the very end you have to walk all the way back manually to the beginning and remember where you were, which is hard because the maps are so big and so lush and so detailed. Like, genuinely, the only problem is the game is so big and huge and long and good that sometimes it is too big and huge and long and good for its own good. And the way they handle class level up is so cool too. When you choose like your class level up, you don't get a bunch of new skills. You get all of your previous skills can now be upgraded into the new skills that will replace the previous skills. So it's like a really good choice you have to make. It's like, do I want to like selectively keep a lower level skill because the effect it has is more beneficial to my particular play style? One small issue is with the job classes when you switch to, the game doesn't actually tell you that what happens is all your previous skills will now gain a button to go replace this with a new skill. You get a very minimal description on what the new job class actually does, and some of them are outright incorrect. One that really got me is, with the shield guy, he has 2 jobs, and one of them is supposed to be, now I use 2 shields, and one of them is now I don't use a shield at all. Which one would you guess you have to pick to continue to have the really powerful, useful reflect damage move? That's right, get rid of your shield. It makes no fucking sense. If you switch to 2 shields, it changes into a different type of blocking attack, and you totally lose the functionality that you originally had, which is reflect any skill. Instead it reflects any spell, but it would reflect any skill. It somehow, I wonder if they misprogrammed and they put like the upgraded version in like the downgraded version slot and vice versa, because it is really overpowered right from the beginning in the game. So yeah, if you want to keep reflect any skill, you have to go for the non-defense focused class, which is a really unintuitive choice. Some of the other class descriptions are a bit vague too, because it is just like, here's vaguely the philosophy of the class, rather than a description of like what skills you actually will get, like this skill upgrades to that. That seemed like a very strange oversight to me, because so many other stuff in the game was like really well tutorialized and like naturalistically tutorialized in a way where it doesn't actually have to go out and tell you. It just like, the game makes it possible, you can go and do it, you will see how it works. That's how it is with all, like, the game never says, oh, the world has opened up, go and do some side quests now. You just find it, like, you get your first quest, like, go to this area, but along the way you bump into a side quest guide, it's like, oh, this goes to this area, and if you go to that area, you'll see, oh, there's a connecting to this area, but you can go early, even though people say you shouldn't go, where you can actually sneak past them, and it's like, it's so good! The game is so good! I also forgot to mention one little thing about the gameplay, is I think it's really neat that you gather relics, and each relic is like an item which gives you a permanent bonus effect in battle, like a passive. I thought that was really cool, and it was an incentive to go around and collect all these things. Like, you can get some from side quests, you can get some from hidden in dungeon, you get some from just saving up a lot of money. It was really fun. I don't know if I got them all up because there is no tracker of how many of them you actually have. Turns out this ramble got really long, so I'm going to be breaking up a section with little screenshot compilations of miscellaneous things I liked which didn't really fit into any particular critique. There's an animation for petting a cat. I think it's neat that they have a colorblind mode. Hooray, accessibility! My favourite random joke NPCs around the world. As a rule, guards don't have anything interesting to say, especially not apple guards. I've been doing this for 52 years, back before vampires and fairies and pigeons were all the rage. Pardon me, I have to eat this entire bird, and I'm afraid I can't handle interruptions at the moment. Nondescript baby noise. How did I get stuck with a house with a hole in the middle of the room? It's always us pirate-looking types that get screwed. There were not very many glitches in the entire game. This is the only one I can say for sure is definitely a glitch. This area where you had these sea-scootering spiders that are along the water and they swoosh around, there is one in one spot which its walk path goes over top of some rocks. Also, one thing which I don't think is a glitch, but maybe a leftover from development, is you fight a thing with multiple different dragons, like different colours, but if you notice, up there in the turn order bar, you can see an icon for a purple dragon, and there is no purple dragon in the battle. For some reason, the brown dragon's icon comes up as purple. So I wonder if there was going to be an extra purple dragon that just got deleted in development. And then also not a glitch for just a random odd mistake that I found funny. Sometimes the name box in text just changes to like stage directions. This man is no longer the elven man, he is the elven man rubs his forehead. I don't know why they didn't just put it in the main text of the box. It never stopped taking me out of my immersion whenever it happened. I've never seen another game which ever does this. And now back to your regularly scheduled Borden ramble. More about the story. It was honestly pretty mid. I don't mean that in a bad way, it's just like, you're basically coming into this for like a generic JRPG story, but with characters who are really funny, and just like really enhance the whole experience. So, what actually happens? After the point we left off, Lena finds out the ring that's got magically fused to her hand is like a super destiny or super ring. And this ancient sealed elf spirit appears to her and is like, hey, gather all the other super destiny accessory things and combine their power. You gotta stop the evil vampires and the evil vampire lord who's like even eviler than evil evils. And it turns out all the elves like seal themselves in stone as a result of like a magic spell they use to like save everyone from the vampires by lifting the continent of Ara Fell into the sky. So along the way you've got like unseal all these stone sealed elves. There are a couple of moments where like dramatically, oh no, some of our friends have also got caught in the stone spell and we need to do like this side story together. It's pretty interesting. I also did like how it subverts the tropes of like a destined hero. The artifact you find is the destined artifact which can stop all the vampires, but there is no actual like prophesized any one single person who can find it. The mysterious elf ghost spirit lady specifically says there is no prophecy, you are not chosen by the gods. Anyone who picked up this artifact would have gained the destiny. It's kind of like the destiny is forced upon you just by the bad luck of being the one who picked up the artifact. So Lena has to deal with like, yes, I'm forced into this destiny, big, massive, like super pressure on me, but also I'm not special. And it's like those two bits contrast a bit, and they have like a I'm sad that they could have had some good character development from it, but the way they deliver it is kind of just like Lena spends the majority of the game not really giving a shit about it and just being like, yeah, adventure, I'm cool and stuff, and then abruptly for like 5 minutes, oh no, my family has been turned to stone because I had a destiny power and the bad guy came after me. Oh no, I'm really angsty about this for 5 minutes and now it's over, now we continue on being sassy and funny. And then by the end of it, when we had like a big, more dramatic, like longer moment of focusing on all her anxieties, it did just kind of come out of nowhere, and it was like this wasn't really built up very well. The game is really at its best when it's parodying or subverting tropes of the archetype, and when it just goes full tilt into taking it all seriously, it kind of falls off a cliff. Ironically, because it's a floating continent. I'll get to more of that when I get to the ending section. I did find it super interesting how like the little moment like, oh no, my family has been turned to stone, was used as a way to introduce the 2 remaining party members. Because oh no, Adrian has got trapped in the stone spell, everyone except you has got trapped in the stone spell because you've got the destiny thing, you're the only one who's immune to it. Oh, what do? We meet a cool and awesome random bisexual woman who just busts in and saves you and takes you on a big quest to undo it all. Like, she's cool and she's grumpy, but she's kind of got a sweetheart. Serikezu, I love her. She is so bombastic and cool, and the game does not treat her nearly well enough. For the first chapter you're doing in a party of only 2, and in the next chapter you're also doing in a party of only 2, but it's switching up between other characters, so you really get a sense of like learning how to play with Lena in particular, and how she can individually support all these different people. Because you have a section you're with Adrian's gone, now you're with Serikezu, and now you're with Doran, and like, then you're all finally together, and now you have the full and complete party, and you have a sense of like how they all work individually, how they all work together, how you as Lena can support them all, and you can figure out, oh, how should I like rebuild my Lena build to work together with them. I did really like, you get this whole like almost solo section of like just you and Serikezu going on the quest to save everybody else. And then what's extra interesting is Doran was like foreshadowed from the start. He's just one of the random characters who like really stood out in the opening town. I was like, that seems like a guy who's going to be plot important. It's the turban guy. I found it was a nice and interesting context, like Serikezu just busts into the plot and saves you in your darkest moment and gets you really attached to her immediately. And then Doran is like, I was here the whole time in the shadows plotting and planning things, like, oh, I have a big secret and I'm going to help you out. Oh, I've been enemies with the secret evil vampires the entire time. No, I'm not going to explain my motives until the very end of the game. Woo! And it's going to be a little bit anticlimactic because the ending is just like that. But up until a moment I was indeed liking him. He is kind of boring, he's kind of a stoic, like, cool guy. Like, imagine like everything about Oren or like Squall from Final Fantasy, but like he doesn't even really have the edge. Like, Squall was kind of an arsehole and he had to develop out of it, and like Oren was like legitimately cool and had more complex stuff going on. He had like a mystery, but also they didn't like just drag it out the entire game and never actually reveal it. Doran is like just kind of the bare minimum for a mysterious guy. He did end up being the character who left the least impact on me because he has like the least like sarcastic or funny moments. He has just played very straight from the end of it. Ironically, very straight. The flaws about him that are in the ending are all related to the stupid love triangle bullshit, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Up until then, he just works kind of well bouncing off. He's like the comically serious person in the group, and he fills a vital role, and like you do feel sorry for him because he seems like he's very angsty, and then like the execution of it in the very end like brings it down because you did spend the whole game like wondering what the mystery was, and then it's kind of like exactly what you'd expect the mystery to be. I gotta say though, I was expecting that twist to happen to someone different. I was going into the start of the game thinking, oh, Serikezu is probably an elf in disguise because she's like super magical and she just knew that you needed help when you needed help, and she's been all cool, she has a history of everyone. But no, she is not the one who is an elf. It is the other extremely obvious person who is obviously an elf. I'm not even spoiler tagging this, like, come on. Genuinely, why else is this random white man wearing a hat that specifically covers his ears? I also honestly really appreciate, like, the game completely turned me around on the shitty dad character. You know how in my first playthrough I was hating this guy, despising this guy? Pretty soon after I stopped playing, they gave like a big old redemption arc to him, like really super fast, like really crammed together, and it was executed really well considering how fast it went. He does do a complete 180. He's like, oh, I was just like, the reason for all of this, I was protecting you, and then, oh, I've changed with the area of my ways, I know I should be giving you more independence, I'm really proud of all the progress you've made, and then like 100% turns like comical degrees of like good dad very fast, but it's actually written so well, like, it doesn't come off as a cheap out, even though in retrospect 5 seconds after it happens he ends up being like attacked, he's injured in bed for like the entire rest of the game, and he becomes like a motivator of like the reason we have to stop the evil vampires is because, oh, we've done this to my dad, oh no. So in retrospect it is kind of obvious that the reason why they changed him and made him good was because we needed to be sad that he was getting injured, but it worked. I was genuinely really motivated to save the world for his sake. So great job, you took a guy out of spies and made me literally want to go run out and punch a vampire god in the face to save the world because of him. I did find it a bit strange though, because the reason he gets injured is because a vampire bites him, and then the characters are just like, oh, we can cure the infection and he'll still be human, and then they do, and it's not a problem. So it was never foreshadowed before that there was like an easy cure to being bitten by a vampire, and that everyone in this village knew it. I feel like it was a bit of a strange way to like go, oh, well, we can't really have him be a part of the main plot, he's just going to be like the motivator who will stay here in this bed for the rest of the game and only get better at the very end. So we just have to give him a illness, but also he's definitely going to recover from it and there is no worries whatsoever. I think they could have foreshadowed of like, if you survive a vampire bite, then like, oh, this village's speciality is medicine, maybe like we know a cure for everything. I don't know. I don't think it honestly would have been an even more engaging plot and even more like got me on his side if he had actually turned up turning into a vampire and he was like, you had to like face up to the fact like vampires are not inherently evil, he's still himself, like even after getting turned, and it could have like really shown how like how much the village cares about him, that like they're not going to ostracize him even though he's a vampire now, and heck, he could have joined the party and fought alongside with you because now he's got superpowers, and that would have been like honestly really really awesome. Snip Doran out of the plot and replace him with redeemed grandpa, and I would love this 10 times more. I'm so sorry, Doran, but you really lose it in the last half. Alas, the game does not ever actually give you a vampire party member. I'm going to talk about that more in the ending section. It did let me down with like how poorly executed the one sympathetic vampire in the story is, but we'll get to that later. I also really like the aesthetic of the vampires in this game. They just have a really pleasant look of like greyish or pale whitish skin tones and then like bold red and yellow hair, and it contrasts really well, and I just found myself running around like looking at every vampire NPC just like gathering up like a Pokedex of cool designs. The game has a lot of callbacks to like earlier RPG Maker things, like specific tropes that were quite common in RPG Maker 2 3K games. I felt really fun seeing that, like seeing all these things like recreated in like a better later gameplay style and improved and everything. There are so many games back then which have a trope of like there's a recurring merchant / save point character, like all your save points are like an actual talking character who like has an ongoing plot throughout the game as like a friendly NPC but never really gets involved in the main plot itself. It's just like, oh, it's a friendly NPC. In this game her name is Talani. I didn't actually find her personality very charming or anything. She is like just another like sarcastic jokey person in a game full of sarcastic jokey people, didn't really have any defining traits, and the game does sometimes act like she's supposed to be like really fun and cool and supposed to be everyone's favourite character, but I don't know, I wonder if she was like an insert or like a developer's OC or something, because certain spoiler things later on do lead me towards that side. For now, all I can say is it gave me fond memories of games like Vampire's Dawn and The Witch's House and stuff like that. One thing I did find was like kind of weird and noticeable was, you know, the spirit elf lady, she has two other spirits that always come with her, like a spirit of a gnome and a spirit of like some kind of like water person, and they get names but they never actually really get any plot or clarification who they are. They're just also spirits that were sealed of her and they don't really do anything. I feel like the role in the plot could have just been the spirit elf lady and nobody else. It almost feels like they're leftovers for like an earlier draft of the plot or something, which is a shame because I like both their designs better than the boring elf lady. She is just a blonde kind of generically attractive lady. The water spirit looking one, I really like her design, but I also know literally nothing about her. Also, an extremely funny moment in the plot of like my bias as a monster game liker made me completely misinterpret a plot point for a second. At one point, one of the minor side villains, like the main villain, the big boring vampire boss guy, he comes along and he's like, oh, you have failed me for the last time. Oh, I'm going to do is my magic. I'm going to turn you into a boss monster to fight the heroes. Oh, you have forfeited your humanity because blah, 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 I hate you. And I did not get that was what was happening at all, because I was distracted by how cool the monster form looked. Like, oh, wow, maybe this vampire boss guy, he does have a heart after all. He's like rewarding his minion with like a really cool scrungly appearance. And then I like looked down the textbook and I was like, oh, this is meant to be a punishment? What the hell? Like, just just look at her, that's objectively cooler than any kind of boring human villain you could be. I do kind of think that would have been genuinely like a better plot, like not necessarily like actually, oh, the villain is totally happy to turn into a monster. It could have been like a conflict of like giving the vampire boss guy like any kind of nuance or reasoning or anything to it, because he is just like, I'm bad, I do a bad because I'm a bad. Instead, if it could have been like, oh, he thinks turning everyone into vampires will create a paradise, and he thinks he's like blessing his followers with like a good thing when he doesn't realize, like, oh, actually they really hate this. And it could have been like a really chilling moment where like the minor boss villain is like begging at his feet like, oh no, I haven't failed you, give me another chance. And he's like, yes, I know, you are my most loyal servant, you've done so much good throughout the game, and like I totally believe you, like you can have a second chance, it's not your fault that you failed, these terrible heroes that we all hate. And it's like, yeah, the villain goes, yes, phew, relief, I'm safe. And then he turns him into a monster, and it's like, yes, because I'm rewarding you for your loyalty by turning you into this. And it's like, no, and then big dramatic boss fight. That could have been like a really evocative and cool scene, and could have instantly established like the twisted morals of the main bad guy, and like what he's going to be like going forward, and like, oh, he's terrible to even his minions, but he thinks he's being good to them, and anything, as opposed to just, I want to rule the world because, I don't know, it's there. The end. I did really like the random dwarf guy Remo came back later on to save everyone. Cropping the screenshot out because there's a bit of like pixelized blood. That's honestly an interesting thing I didn't expect, is that they do have like a little bit of gore in this game, and it always seems to come out of nowhere because like the art style is so like kid friendly, and it goes so long without showing the vampires like graphically sucking blood, and then when it does happen it's like, oh, what the fuck. But anyway, I really liked how Remo came back, not just because it became a meme during my playthrough, but also just, hell yeah, Grandpa saves us in the last minute. There are two separate points in the plot where a grandpa appears and repays your kindness for helping him earlier in the story by saving you from a big old tragedy. Simeon the Elder also comes back, one of the NPCs early on. And what's extra great is he comes back with your redeemed father. He spends the whole game sick in bed, and then he finally gets like cured of the vampirism, and then he comes back right before the final dungeon with the consortium of every grandpa you've ever befriended in the entire game, specifically only the grandpas. And they come and they kick ass with a bunch of crazy cultists, and they're like, we'll hold them back and let you get through to the main villain. I'm like, yes, this is exactly what I, Bondford, particularly want in stories. Thank you for recognising the most real characters in the character. I think every game should have a moment of every minor NPC grandpa you have ever befriended coming along and being like, hi, we are super crazy fighters, we have bombs, we have spears, we have an entire catapult, and we're going to kick the arse of every minor villain in this entire plot, and catapult you like 20 minutes ahead in the story and skip a bunch of shitty like mini boss fights. You go ahead, you run straight to the main villain right now, because we, and our combined awesomeness of being geriatric, will save the world. It got me more hyped than anything has ever hyped me in all of hype. And it sucks that this is kind of like the last good moment before the ending gets bad. Miscellaneous story screenshot things I forgot to mention. I found it neat that the game says that your mother was also a cool badass adventurer when she was a kid. It never comes up, and she's the family member who has the least plot importance out of everyone, but it was neat, and it makes me think, like, if you happen to like want to do a prequel showing her adventure, I'd be interested in seeing it. I also like there was a little bit of world building on why you only ever see like grandparent dwarves. Apparently in this universe it's because dwarves live really long, and they very rarely have children. In fact, it's so rare that whenever someone gets pregnant they have a big like village-wide celebration. And that's just a general rundown of the story and all the bits I liked in it. There's honestly not too much story in this game. It is kind of a more gameplay focused one, and you know what's a great sign of quality is, I usually hate gameplay focused games. I'm usually all about the story. This is a game where I didn't like the story and I loved the gameplay, and that is so rare for me. And the gameplay, I loved it so much that it saved the whole game for me. It rocketed up to the highest heights. So just bear in mind that as much as I am going to complain about the ending, it's a tiny portion of a really great game. And this is a game where even if you don't give a shit about what the plot is happening, you're just going to enjoy the battles anyway. It is so much fun. And it's so customizable to find your own type of fun. Enjoy this! Enjoy this! Subliminal messages, enjoy the game! The next intermission. Bond Hyper focuses about cute and adorable monsters. Yeah! Here are some other monster designs I encountered that I think are really cute and great. I really like the bush bears, this strange and unique design, some kind of like massive like earthen hedgehog creature with grass for a mane that's also kind of human. It looks really cool. I really wish that there was like some concept art of like these designs in full, because sometimes it's a bit hard to make out the details on the smaller ones, but they're really huggable. I love them. I like it comes in various different variations for like autumn foliage and mix and match and stuff. I love them, they're cute. I was always happy whenever a new one appeared. This worm boss, I love it. I love her design so much. It is so scrungly. I want to hug it so much. And I also really like the effect. It's got like half of it being underwater and all that. In battle, like it sort of like flows. It has like a wavy effect on the part underwater. And it looks really good and like really well and seamless how it integrates together. You can't really see in a screenshot. And we do get an explanation of where the adorable mutants come from. Apparently, sometimes just completely at random, a vampire can mutate into one of these, and I think that's awesome, and I think they should all do that, and it's great, and I would much prefer to be this. I'm glad that it is correct in law that I could technically become one of these, perhaps, and I'll make it my entire life mission to do that, because it's so aesthetically pleasant. For a supposedly terrifying mutant, just look at how cute it looks. It looks like a little gummy candy. Rimsey, I care you. I will choose to believe forever that the great snake hydra worm god Rimsey is actually a good person. You just encounter this in a side quest where this guy betrays you and he's like, oh, I was going to summon an evil demon god the whole time, and then the evil demon god just eats him and it just anticlimactically ends. So I'm going to choose to believe that this not an evil demon god, this just happens to be a nice monster, and everyone is misjudging him, and they were like, hey, I don't want to be summoned by an evil guy to do your evil bidding, fuck off, I'm leaving. Unfortunately, you do have to fight Rimsey and then like beat it up and it dies like canonically, like even though it just destroyed the villain for you. I wish we could have just ended it with like, and then we became friends with Rimsey and it just lives peacefully in this cavern and never hurts anyone ever again. I love it. I really love the faces. Such a good mix of like a bug and like a snake and like a dragon and a skull, and it's I really want to hug and pat every single little head. They're so cute. I want to feed them little Maltesers snacks and they're my pal. The end. I can't remember the name of these guys. I think it was like Wraith or Ghost or something, but I really like them. It's such a unique idea. Because like, as you can see that they clearly don't look at their actual undead spirits. There's some kind of jellyfish which has like a skull-shaped face on it. And it's so cool. They were animated all squishy and blue, but I really like the idea. They're not important to the plot in any way. They're just a random enemy I really like. They also look especially cute on their overworld sprite. They are so wide. And you can see more clearly here that they just happen to be like skull-shaped and not actually a kind of skeleton monster at all. I think it's an interesting idea of like a jellyfish that for whatever reason has evolved to mimic dead humans. I don't know why. This is a cool boss. I thought was really cool in the screenshots. It's even more cool in game. It's so cool how they have like the tapering off into the distant sky effect. It also looks really good in animation. It's just great. I love it. I love. This game is so good at scrungly worms for some reason. I don't know why, but I am not complaining. The only other problem, sadly, is that the story gets worse as it goes on, and the ending is like really surprisingly bad. It's not like the worst ending in anything, but it's really a huge step down from like all the rest of the entire game. And it comes so out of nowhere because it's been so consistently great up to that point. But because the entire rest of the game was so fucking amazing, I don't feel in any way that my experience was cheapened by like the last 5 minutes being naff. It did take the wind out of my sails a bit, but it didn't change the fact that I had so much fun. And I'm someone who I do often get my experience of a game ruined by a bad ending. So that's just giving you a perspective, like it's not that kind of bad ending. It's just kind of, oh well, that was kind of half-assed, weren't it? It's weird how it suddenly seems rushed when the rest of the game is so fleshed out. I wonder if maybe the developers put too much time into the early chapters and making all this replayability and like early open world stuff. They didn't have enough time for the ending. Because it is also a notable thing. Is like I said, like once you run out of upgrades and stuff, once you've completed all the side quests, there are no new side quests in Chapter 5. It is like Chapter 5 is just like, oh, you can just go back and recap everything else if you haven't finished it yet. Otherwise, it's really short. You just go straight into the ending. You just have like one dungeon to and it's like one of the easiest dungeons in the game. With also the most samey graphics, the maps are so like bespoke and well made and great the entire game, and then in the end it is kind of like, oh, like every enemy now has the same sprite on the overworld. It's just a kind of like a generic shadowed man, even though none of the actual enemies you get from it are a generic shadowed man. And like we're just going around sort of a ruin. These are like minions of the villain guy turn into these, and it's like it's entirely randomized what character model they'll have like based on the overworld. I find it really neat that the only humanoid one is very femme, so you'll have like on the overworld like a male minion, then he'll poof into that thing. And I thought that's cool. It's probably not intentional trans representation anyway. It's just like a coincidence of like a random enemy generator. But I thought that was neat. But just all of them look really good. I love how they all have like a contained aesthetic, but they have such wildly varying different bodies. Your options are like you could turn into a woman, a multi-headed baby, a whale, the free genders. what I did find really great, like thematically the ending works really well, even if what actually happens is kind of shit. Thematically I really liked that the final dungeon is a place you've visited previously, which is now is recontextualized into, oh, it was actually really important all along, and wow, think about how far we've come since we got here and everything. It's a really good thematic idea. But every single thing after that point is bad. The entire final dungeon and all the plot twists and the boss are all just bad and really generic, which is strange. Like, the game really flies on, like, the fact it always had a generic plot, but the characters were really good, and then in the end it goes, like, 100% serious with all the generic plot. It's like, I have no reason to really care. You've never given me any reason to care. The villain is, like, the most crappy guy ever, and you faked me out with the idea there might be a new, different, more interesting villain taking him. That's one thing I'm genuinely salty about. Actually, let's put up one. Okay, I'm gonna go into spoiler discussion of exactly why the ending is shit. I'll put up my summary here before. My summary. The game is absolutely fucking great. One of the best. It's tied with Careen Cross for my favourite game in this entire marathon so far, because they're both really great, but in entirely opposite ways. Careen Cross is a game that is like a really, really short, self-contained, little narrative experience of not too much gameplay. And it's good, it's over fast, and it's great, and it makes you feel things, and the ending is really, really, really sad. The story is very original and different and unusual and strange. As well as the art style and everything. Ara Fell is like, it's a very traditional story, it's a very classic JRPG, it's very standard, there is nothing breaking the mold in terms of anything, except the characters are really, really good. And it's the opposite, it's a really, really long game with lots of well fleshed out content. They are both equally amazing, and it's entirely up to you which kind of thing you prefer in an RPG maker game. Whether you want short, like, experimental things, changing up the genre, doing like a nice chunk of a story that can be played easy, or if you want something that actually does rival the length of like actual AAA games of the time, like it's 20 hours. For nowadays, that's not too long, but like at the time it came out, that was around the time that regular JRPGs would be. And that's really, really impressive for an indie developer. If you want good small or good great, these are your two equally valid, amazing options. That is my final result on Ara Fell. Now I will start going into the spoilers of why the ending is really shit, but it doesn't ruin the entire game. If you don't want to hear this, you can stop the video now and just go off and have some tea. Have a mango smoothie. Have your favourite drink on me. Don't throw your favourite drink on me. Okay, spoiler warning in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Catastrophe! Biggest problem with the ending is it suddenly starts taking all the generic RPG things really, really, really straight. It just becomes 100% serious, 100% like, you were supposed to be invested in saving us, well, I'm not invested in saving us, Walter. The entire game, it's been like a parody of its concept. Like, the generic mentor lady suddenly dies, it's like, oh, everyone's really genuinely sad about her, and I'm like, we barely got to know her, she had no defined personality whatsoever. And everyone's like, this is really the saddest thing ever, and then it looks, all the most cliche things you'd expect to happen happens, like, oh, she comes back in the last 5 minutes as a disembodied voice to like tell you to believe in yourself and you unlock the special power. So, oh, she wasn't dead all along. I had no feeling. I knew she wasn't dead all along. She was going to come back in the last 5 minutes. That's exactly what you'd expect in the most cliche plot. And it just really goes like that. The characters stop being so like sarcastic and really personality and stuff. They kind of put their personality on the back burner to focus entirely on this main story, which is not very good to begin with. Like, you had this whole thing where suddenly our main character is crying. She's like, oh, I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this. Oh, I can't handle this destiny of like being. And there is no lead up to this. She has not at any point expressed like any of this. I just feel like this is what we have to do. We have to have at the last minute our hero like doubting their purpose and stuff, and then being helped by having a random love confession from the secondary main guy. There is no development of that at all. It doesn't go anywhere. The entirety of the game is just like the first 15 hours of the entire game. It's just they have no chemistry whatsoever. The couple, they're great friends. They're great, sarcastic, funny friends. And the only time it's ever mentioned of being a couple is like everyone around them goes, "Oh, you must be a couple because you're so close. Oh, you can't just be platonic friends." And they're replying like, "Shut up, that's really awful." And then in the end, oh, they do become lovers after all. They couldn't just stay platonic friends. They just feel like some sort of weird half-assed backwards moral. But yeah, it does come out of nowhere. I was saying right at the beginning, like, oh yeah, if they developed it well, I could totally like see it if they went for a romance. They don't. It is just like, oh, she's had her darkest moment crying about this thing that was never mentioned as a problem before now, and he comes in and is like, oh, I'll make you feel better by kissing you. And now I guess we were in love all along, and we just never talked about it until this moment where I kissed you. Okay. okay. And then they have a generic anime conflict of like, oh no, I don't know really if I want to be with you, I just kissed you back because I was confused in a moment of depression. And he's like, oh, well, you can't just toy around with me like this, oh, you were playing with my feelings. And it's like, no, she wasn't. You literally kissed her when she was like in the throes of depression. It makes sense that she would, yes, be confused and like would have clung to you and thought like maybe this relationship will solve my self-esteem problems basically, and like it is kind of bad for you to confess in that kind of moment. Obviously there's no bad meaning in it, but like in real life this does generally happen. People rush into relationships because they're in like a really low and depressed place, and then it ends up not working out and it ends up breaking up good friendships is what they had. I'm glad the game doesn't go, instead it just goes with, oh, now it's resolved 1 second later in a cutscene. They didn't talk out the problem. It's just like, okay, now I'm not mad at you anymore and we'll never mention it again. And oh, by the way, we are in a relationship now and my doubts about it will never mention it again. It was just, okay. There's a lot of that where it feels like, oh, we're getting to the end, we have to throw in every JRPG trope, even if there was no foreshadowing. If it doesn't link into the plot, it's just going to happen now because it has to happen before the end and we're running out of time. And then what I really dislike is how he handled Nash. Nash is the sympathetic vampire, quote unquote. He is not. They do not. It's so weird. It's so bizarre. I was saying from the beginning I wanted to have a sympathetic vampire like who would join the party or like something like that, or like even just a villain who would be sympathetic and sad and I'd cry. Nash is like the game attempts to like run the motions for that without actually having it happen. He's the guy who like from the start is like, I'm a sympathetic vampire, my motivation is I want to be cured of my vampirism, I don't want to prey on human beings anymore. Oh, I don't realise my boss is actually evil and he doesn't want the same thing. And at the end he's like, oh, I do realise my boss is evil. And like, oh, you think like, oh, does he join your side then? No. Oh, does he turn against his boss then? No. What? He is just like, oh, we have to fight to the death. Literally, why? Him and the protagonist have the exact same goal. They both want to end vampirism and stop this evil guy from destroying the world. But for no reason, just about his honor. Oh, his honor. He's like, oh, I have to continue fighting for this cause which I no longer believe in, to defend this guy who I think is shit and who killed all my friends. It's not explained well. The only way I can like make it make sense in my mind is like, what if he's like, I want to kill the bad guy, I don't want you to do it, I want to do it with my own hands, you're kill stealing. But that's not what's said in the game at all. It is literally just like, oh, we have to fight, oh, we shouldn't fight because we both have the same entire everything and we should be on the same side. Yes, that's why it's so tragic that we have to fight. No explanations given for why we have to fight. It just reminds me of fucking SpongeBob and Patrick the Lid sequence. It's like, Nash, that's not a redemption, that's a gun!
First get a job. Patrick, that's a gun.
Yes.
And my friend Nova Fander is actually a YouTube poop editor exactly that. So yeah, entirely worthless character. I started out feeling sympathetic for him. I could not feel sympathetic for him just how long it went on of him continuing to do all the evil bidding of the villain despite saying I'm sympathetic a lot. It does feel like the character was just thrown in to make you feel bad about having to kill a sympathetic guy, but with no justification for why you have to kill a sympathetic guy. It just makes him less sympathetic. It makes him seem like he is just some sort of weird hypocritical asshole. What really gets me how weirdly visceral it is when you have to take him down. He is the only enemy in the entire game who has realistic bloodied battle damage. Like this game, there's been like vague splatters of blood every now and again, like mild pixelated blood when a vampire attacks and stuff. This is the most ridiculously gory thing in the entire game. As you fight Nash, he slowly gets more and more bloodied and battered, and by the end he's like a literal like a fucking puddle of the floor, and it would be really disturbing if the only thing saving it is the fact it's like little chibi sprites. It's not like too much detail, but there is just so much red everywhere. You were buried in red pixels and sadness. A really transparently manipulative way to get you to feel sad about this sympathetic villain who has no reason to be fighting you in the first place. That was the moment I was like, okay, I can't feel anything for Nash anymore. The game is just standing there yelling at me, feel something, without actually delivering it. And I feel more likely to not feel it. And then we get into the actual villain who's just complete shit. He's just like, I want to become a god because power. I enjoy being a vampire and killing everyone for no reason. I have no stated motive whatsoever except power. I start and begin the end knowing nothing about Baramon. I have no reason to care for him, and I have even more reason to care about Nash's plotline because, like, it reminds me of fucking Bagramon from Digimon Fusion. Bagramon is the main villain. There is another secondary villain who comes in who isn't a sympathetic villain, but he's a villain with, like, much more complexity and actual story and actual motives. He comes in and he tries to take over from Bagramon, and you think, oh wow, yeah, maybe that's the reason Bagramon was so poorly developed and has had zero screen time in the entire thing. We've only ever seen him sit him on his throne going, I'm generic and I like power. Everyone else do all my bidding for me. And you think, oh, maybe that was all foreshadowing the fact that this guy is actually going to be the main villain. This guy who actually has been shown doing things and has a developed personality and a reason for even existing in the plot. But no, Bagramon just casually destroys that guy in like 5 seconds. He's like, this entire guy's subplot existed just to prove, oh, Bagramon is really, really powerful, you know, right, guys? He can defeat even far more superior villains who I really wish he hadn't defeated. No, it doesn't work. It doesn't make me like Bagramon more. And then, predictably, his final boss battle is exactly as boring as you thought it was from the beginning. It is just power, 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 power. Bagramon in this game, coincidentally, has a very similar name. Exactly the same thing. You don't even see him. He just stands around. He orders everyone else to do his things. He has no stated motive. He's just, at the last minute, oh, ha, ha, a evil, oh, the power of the evil, become a god, steal the MacGuffin, blah, 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 eat the MacGuffin, become Scrungly. His only good point is that he has a really cool, like, a bunch of boss forms. But it is kind of funny how the characters are all just saying, like, Barabon, he's so terrible and ugly now, oh, how can he possibly think this final boss god power was good? And I'm just like, this is genuinely the only good thing in his entire plot, that this final boss form looks really cool, and I would genuinely want to be that. The game has very good monster design. And then the worst thing is, after you defeat Barabon, it's a scripted loss. Like, I fucking wasted this final boss with, like, all my overpowered extra, like, power of every side quest powers. It's like, you get into 1 HP, he can never go below 1 HP. It's not even just a scripted loss, like, once you defeat him, the game says, oh, you actually lost. It's like, you have to wait, like, 3 turns after you've depleted him to 1, because he's only allowed to stop after a certain amount of turns in the battle. So I was just sitting there with him at 1, like, waiting for him to eventually charge up his fucking now I actually win move. It's really annoying. And he does this now I actually win move, and then, like, oh, the mentor lady is like, oh, the power was within you all along, use the something, now you can defeat it. Even though I already fucking defeated him, and we didn't need to do this at all. But then using the power within, actually, like, that's the bad thing. The whole game is, like, generic save the world plot, and in the end, the only subversion is that you don't save the world. It's shit. You defeat the bad guy, but you don't save the world. It's just a really, really ridiculous downer of an ending. It's not like a full downer, because I do show, oh, some people from, like, the first town in the game survived and they're trying to rebuild, and, like, basically, Ara Fell is like a floating continent. It gets destroyed, you fall down into the abyss of the continent below, which, like, no one knows what's there. Oh, it might be uncharted, it might have people living down here we don't know, and that's just where it ends. It's like, you defeated the bad guy, but his plan worked anyway. He destroyed the world, and only a few people have survived the world being destroyed, and then we're now on another world, and we have no guarantee whatsoever that we'll be able to rebuild this new world. And I did like that they had a playable epilogue of being able to walk around your tiny new town in the new world, but it is just, like, really, really sad. You just walk around and people are like, oh, so many people have died, we're still sending out search parties every day to try and find people, but we have to accept that they've died, and it's just, everyone's still mostly optimistic, I guess. I get the idea that the game was, like, wanting you to think that, yeah, they do succeed, they do rebuild the world in the end, but it's just, it is such a fucking downer, and there is no guarantee that's how it goes. It does feel like it was leaving off on a sequel hook, but no sequel has ever come out, so I don't know. And the weirdest fucking thing is that the game ends on, like, fucking cucking the side plot romance in the worst possible way. Like, throughout the entire game, like, Seri cares him, this other party member's door, and he's like, oh, I'm the generic mysterious guy who's obviously an elf in disguise from the first moment you see him, and it's noted that he always wears a hat that hides his ears. But they get until the very end of the game, and everything involving him in the final end of the game is, like, the worst part. Like, they completely skewer his character in the last 5 seconds. Like, throughout most of the game, he's being, like, mysterious. He's like, oh, I'm being mysterious to protect you all, and, like, you think he's gonna have some eventual arc where he reveals his secret, like, no, I know, I can trust you guys, I'm sorry I kept the secret for long. No, he never chooses to reveal his secret. Someone else reveals his secret for him, and he's against it right to the last minute. He's like, oh, I know, I still don't want to reveal my secret to anybody, I still don't want to trust my party members, even though we've had this entire fucking game of bonding and becoming his friends. He also, Seri Kezu, she's his ex-girlfriend. She had no idea why he spontaneously, like, left her in the middle of the night with no explanation. He left her because he's an elf and she would find out that he never ages and stuff like that, but he never explained any of this shit, and he also, like, he's only now, like, come back into contact with her and it's like, oh no, oh shit, like, should I pretend I'm someone else? He doesn't even, like, own up to his crimes or anything. He's just like, well, not his crimes, like, his bad choices. I could forgive him making these choices, like, in the heat of the moment, like, thinking he was doing good, but, like, having an arc of realising they were bad, but no, it just doesn't happen. Instead, like, everybody else, like, forces him to reveal his secrets, and then everyone's like, oh, I forgive you anyway, even though you didn't do the most basic bare minimum thing to show you're willing to change. And he spends the entire game like, no, I can't get back with you, Seri Kezu. I also can't tell you why I broke up with you, Seri Kezu. Also, you keep finding out for the entire game, it's a running joke that he has had, like, 5,000 other ex-girlfriends and everyone else in the game, but he constantly keeps saying like, oh no, but I loved you best, Serikezu. Like don't be mad at me for this. Again, once you get the revelation that he's an elf and he doesn't age, he's like 1,000 years old, it makes sense that like, yeah, he has a bunch of ex-girlfriends because he's lived like 1,000 lifetimes, and it's not just he ditched her to go with someone else. It's just like he ditched her and like 10 years later okay, I'll take a chance on love again. Yeah, it's still like, why didn't you just go back to her? But like, why didn't you trust her to tell your secret and everything? Like, have a short, happy life with her rather than this. It's still like, it's more morally complex, but he lets her believe the entire game that he is just cheating on her for no reason, and it keeps coming. You keep wondering, when is it going to be fucking revealed? When is he going to have his redemption arc? He never does. The worst possible thing is, in the ending, there's a scene that seems like, oh, he's finally going to like confess, oh, I loved you all along, Sarika, so I do want to get back with you together. But no, instead it subverts it, and he fucking, there's this one other surviving elf at the end, and she's like, oh, we have to fuck to repopulate our race, and he's like, oh, well, I don't love you, but I guess I have to fuck you to repopulate our race, so I can't go back with Serikezu, and they just cuck Serikezu. That is like the second to last textbooks of the entire game is just, oh, Serikezu, I have to cheat on you again with someone else, but this time it's for a really good reason, and Serikezu is like, okay, I guess I learned my lesson, now I forgive you for cheating on me and I'll let you cheat on me. Like, well, that was supposed to be the lesson she learned. It was supposed to be her learning a lesson, not him. Like, no, fuck you, Dora. I take back all of the credit I gave you for the entire game. The game ending is so bad. It has a shitty final boss. Defeating him doesn't save the world. And in the last 5 minutes, it completely character assassinates one of the characters you cared about and makes him a total arsehole. But at the same time, acts like he's not supposed to be perceived as an arsehole. He's supposed to be perceived as a good guy, and like, we're supposed to think the lady is an arsehole and a nag for being mad at him for what he's done. Like, oh. And what I hate is that the one other elf he goes with is like a genuinely good and interesting plot twist. When I was mentioning before in the section of like RPG Maker 2K3 callbacks and stuff like that, I was mentioning that there's like a recurring like merchant / save point character who appears in every area of the game and is always a little bit ahead of you no matter what. No, I wonder why. It turns out in the end it's revealed she's the last surviving member of the elves aside from Doran, who is obviously an elf. That's why I found it really interesting. It's like they had the obvious twist of the guy who's obviously an elf, and they have the unexpected twist of the person you never suspected would be an elf. And they do it really good. It's like this character who for the entire game has only been like an interface element, an entirely side quest based character, suddenly actually steps into the main plot. It's like you walk in and you all the party is like in their lowest point and they've been defeated, and you just see in the corner, oh, there's a merchant character, and then she teleports over and it's like, oh, I'm part of the main plot actually. I was secretly the long-term enemy of the bad guy, and that's why I've been helping out the entire game. I'm the last surviving elf aside from Doran, and like, oh, then she like uses crazy magic to like blow him up and save you all and give you a second chance to fight him for real. That was a really genuinely good moment. But sadly that leads into the bad ending because, oh boy, she's the one who just randomly goes, hey, fuck me to repopulate our race. Don't make up with your girlfriend who you betrayed the entire game. Just randomly have sex with me, a person who you've outright said you don't even like, but you just have to have sex with me, I guess. And that's like the final ending note to the game. There's like just one more text box after that, because like the main two characters, like aside from the two who just had like the worst fucking day of their life, are now like, oh, and now the adventure continues. Let's go explore this new world and see if we can actually find if other people live here. And that's how it ends. The last fucking text box before that is just, I guess your boyfriend has to fuck me now. The end. Maybe this character was like an insert into a developer's OC or something, because she gets treated for the entire game like she's so badass and she's so cool, and she has this big moment of becoming suddenly plot important in the last 5 seconds, like the most plot important character ever, like one of only two of this like secret group of people and stuff like that, and the one of only two who survives it. And they do find some more elves briefly, but they all get defeated easily, and she doesn't because she's so cool. And then in the last 5 minutes it's like, hey, the cool playboy character, now I'm gonna fuck him. I do wonder if it was just like the developers really wanted to make this character seem really cool, and they did it at the expense of everybody else's character development in the last 5 seconds. But yeah, those are my complaints about how the ending of the game fucks up a lot of everything that it seemed that the game was building up to. Highlights all its worst traits, while like throwing away all the stuff I really enjoyed, like the sarcastic stuff and like the interesting personalities and everything, and like, but it doesn't ruin the entire rest of the game, because I still did just have like over 20 hours of great time and 1 hour of bad. It balances out perfectly well. And also just the fact that the problems were so disconnected from everything that happened before, I can just believe it, like, no, it didn't really happen. I can substitute my own brain of what actually happened. Honestly, I would have preferred, even if they had the idea of like, oh, the subversive, we didn't save the world and now we're trapped on this other world thing, but they just like developed it a bit more, and we actually got to see more of the old world. We ended on some kind of like, yes, it is actually positive note. I don't know. So yeah, that's my final verdict. Still one of the best games I've played this entire marathon. Still absolutely worth playing the whole long ass playthrough. Absolutely great. Just just fell apart in the last 5 seconds. And also, Doran, I hate you now. I hate you despite the fact that you were really great and useful in my party for most of the game. I was really invested in you for ages. I wanted to get back together with your cool bisexual girlfriend, but you did not. You ditched her for literally who? Literally the most random person in the middle of nowhere who just said, by the way, race purity, the end. The myth of Adam and Eve does not even fucking work. Maybe in a fantasy world they can somehow make it work to actually repopulate the world from 2 people. But no, it just comes off as Talani making a really shitty excuse to steal a guy's girlfriend in the last 5 seconds for no reason. Because there is no fucking way you can repopulate an entire species of 2 people. It just does not work. Like, the genetic diversity, the gestational period, the amount of time you have to be fucking, the fact that all of your children would have to be fucking their sisters and brothers to be able to continue it up, it's just nothing about this future seems positive. Couldn't they have just said, like, Doran and Seri get back together, and because she is like a crazy inventor mage, she like works on a way to invent a way to actually revive elves? They're just hitting me. That genuinely would have been a better ending. It would have been better both for her and for the stated purpose of repopulating the elves if they had not randomly shipped him up with someone he had no chemistry with in the last 5 seconds. Fuck you even more, Doran. I am creating a portal in my mind to take Seri away to a better dimension where she will date lesbians and never be hurt again. So it is also a bit of a shame that they only very briefly mention that she is also bisexual and she never actually gets together with a girl during it. The only girl who's like her ex-girlfriend turns out to be evil. It's a bit of a shame. There's also this one just completely out of the way line that Lita's brother is apparently gay, but he is such a non-character in the plot. The sum total of conversations you have with him are basically like the intro cutscene, this conversation, and then just like in the end, oh, I'm so proud of you, sister, you saved the world. End. But I do like that the game just casually sprinkles a little bit of like pro-LGBT every now and then. This is like, oh, it's a good classic RPG Maker game, but they've added improvements from later on and stuff. I'm not sure when this game actually came out. I know it's a remake of an older game, so I don't know if like the original game was less good or not, or if they've added these improvements, or if it was always progressive for its time. Anyway, sending Seri to another world full of bisexual acceptance where she can date men and or women who are nicer to her and do not ditch her for the sake of repopulating a race with a random save point character. Come on. Thanks super neat, the game has a flavour text for the items just be Lita herself talking and saying sassy things about the items, so here's a little mini montage of my favourite. When I was little I thought these puffballs grew into clouds. I made a juice out of this once and drank it with my breakfast, but I was scolded because they're too expensive for juice. It is said that each angel flower that blooms is the spirit of one of the goddess's children. I wonder if I should have picked this. The cloud rose was a flower they used to throw at weddings a long time ago when they were easier to find. You get so much lore too about the whole thing of like the resources on Ara Fell are slowly running out as we go along. There's so many little things hinting at it before the game actually drops that plot point. It's so cool. Metal is hard to come by and worth a lot. I've heard it can hold magic. See, that's a really cool bit of world building just squirreled away in these funny little descriptions. I like how even which items sell for more has like lore behind it. Also, interesting reason why Earth Essence is the cheapest of all the essences is because it's the essence of the Abyss, aka the surface world that Ara Fell like sprung off from. So it's literally the essence of Earth, but no one even calls it Earth anymore, they call it Abyss. That's just an interesting idea. It says they think less of it because that's where they send their dead. That's also really like a messed up piece of world building when you think about it. Because they have a limited amount of like land and space and resources on Ara Fell because it's a floating island. Whenever anyone dies, they give them like a sky funeral. They basically just throw them off the edge of the island, and then that's why they mythologize like the Earth's surface, the Abyss, as being like a world of the dead because that's where they send all their dead. But it's also the place that they came from before the island rose into the sky. It's so cool. It's so interesting. I would love to play a whole series of more games in this setting. I also like how only the equipment upgrades are written in the voices of the other characters, the ones you're buying it for. Most of them are less interesting because they're not as much as a sassy character as your protagonist, but I did have a few that gave me a laugh. The blessed coif. I wore it once in my sleep. I had visions. This is like the only time when Doran was actually like, his overly seriousness actually made him kind of funny. I wish they'd leaned more into his aspect during the story. And then Seri has, finally, something suitable for me when you get the final upgrade for her. I thought that was really fitting and cute. I did not expect that in the end, the random item flavour text would end up hitting me straight in the heart. Final upgrade for Lita's Bracer. I know what I'm here to do, finally. Oh, my heart, my soul. Looking further into the development of Ara Fell, I have found mysterious things that no one now seems to remember anymore. Pretty much every site I found listed the version on Steam as the remake. It is actually the second remake of Ara Fell. Everywhere seems to list the original release date of Ara Fell as 2016. No, that was the first remake. On this original blog post of the creator Bad Luck, and also Rad Luck depending on which website they're on, you can see here a post dated 1 year before Ara Fell supposedly first ever came out according to Steam, saying that she's in the process of making a remake of Ara Fell. In this, she says that it was 10 years ago that Ara Fell was first made. The only source I've been able to find of when the original one came out was 2007, but if it's to believe it was actually earlier than that, so this website may be incorrect. Here is a picture of the title screen of the first version as far as I can tell. Ara Fell, The Legend of Dirasetsu Hollow. From reading further into the blog post, it seems this version was originally made with a Japanese version of RPG Maker 2003, using the early fan translation of the engine that used to exist. And the main motivator for creating the remake was RPG Maker 2K3 finally getting an actual official English release. The original 10 years ago version seems to have been incomplete, and surprisingly was intended to be much more complete than the final version we got. I'm honestly glad of where we ended in right now. Beefy as fuck with like what we've got right now, like 20 hours in the RPG Maker game, but apparently it's going to be a whole 10-part series of multiple extremely long games. And that's why this version had a subtitle to it when the later ones don't. All that we know is the final story was originally going to just be parts 1 and 2 of the first part of 10 parts. Like, holy shit. Twice as big as Chrono Trigger in the creator's own word. And the reason the project was originally abandoned is, well, same reason I've abandoned so many of my RPG Maker projects. You get into it and you think you want to make the best RPG Maker game ever for your first game, and you end up going way further in your skill level and you just burn yourself out with working way too hard. I honestly feel incredibly connected knowing that someone who succeeded in making such a super popular, like, commercial game that's had a bunch of different remakes and has amazing success, and then even more games after that which had even more success, still had the same issues on their first project. It makes me feel more hope that maybe someday I'll be able to actually succeed at something. I doubt I'll ever get as successful as Ara Fell though. And then interestingly, someone else comes into the picture, something I didn't expect. You know that website was listing, the one where Choose Wisely was hosted and then a bunch of other farming games stuff were hosted? The early 90s looking like really useful website hosting all the different RPG Maker games. The creator of Avion, the flagship title of that particular website, is every fucking thing like secretly connected. Like, what are the odds that Choose Wisely was the first thing I picked to play and then every other game has turned out to somehow be connected to Choose Wisely, or another game connected to Choose Wisely is connected to that game? Oh gosh. But yeah, anyway, that's why this comes into the picture. The creator of the game worked on other games after Ara Fell, wasn't less ambitious, but she kept coming back to Ara Fell as her dream project she wanted to finish someday. And then the creator of Avion and that wonderful website which hosts Avion and in every other game came in and said, hey, RPG Maker XP, want to make a remake of Ara Fell in that? So here we have 2 whole remakes of this existed that we didn't know about. Here is Ara Fell XP, the unreleased, uncompleted potential remake which never actually happened. We have a wildly different art style. I think this is just the default XP style, but it does look really cool. I'm not sure if it would have been a remake or starring entirely new characters, because none of the characters here look recognisable as any of the ones we know. But it's definitely still on Ara Fell because it's a floating island. Also interesting, it has some kind of hotbar on the bottom of all these things. Was it going to be changed into an action RPG temporarily? Yeah, it says real-time combat, fancy spells, pixel movement. Again, it's so sad to see the developer fell into the same problems again. And they, as they say, repeated the same problems, got so ambitious, wanted to make the best Ara Fell game physically possible, and it just didn't work as well in RPG Maker XP as opposed to 2K3. Interestingly, on a side that's not really related to it, the partnership with the Avion creator ended up instead coming down to trying to create an entire new game engine from scratch to make a sci-fi side-scrolling shooter. Unsurprisingly, this also did not end well. I can only imagine the level of absolute hell it must take to program a game maker, and I really admire her for attempting something such a huge project, but I can see, like, 3 people working on making an entire game maker, when you consider how many people must actually be on Enterbrain making RPG Maker, it would have taken like decades to finish something like that. It's a shame because it does look really cool what they have. And then they say the reason they quit it is just everyone realised they were not enjoying the project at all and it was really struggling, and I can sympathise so much. Again, it came back to the game I really want to work on is Ara Fell, but I keep not thinking I'm not good enough for it, and then I'm working on these other games, and like I can relate to that so much. When you just have an idea that you've nursed in your mind forever and it keeps coming back, I'm so glad that she eventually like committed to like she eventually came back and did Ara Fell and found the success she wanted with Ara Fell, and I am so happy to hear. I am even happier for this developer. They made one of the best RPG Maker games I've ever played. Hearing how much of a chronicle of toil it was to get there. Also, it seems the creator of the Avion and that website is also the maker of Skyboard, which is another game we're going to be playing later in the marathon. Now I'm extra excited about. She seems like a very nice lady who's been helping out with other developers. And the website is really cool and helped me find even more games for the marathon and just, yeah. And then what I said at the beginning happened. RPG Maker 2K3 finally got an official English translation. That's surprising to hear it happened after RPG Maker XP had even come out. I had no idea of the scale of it. I didn't realise just how long it only existed in the fan translated state. But yeah, it came out and the creator was like, fuck yeah, I'm going to remake Ara Fell. I'm finally going to do it. I'm going to make something worthy of actually being sold on my cool friend's website, my friend who does Avion. And then she did, and it was great. And it was so great it got another remake 4 years later and was even greater and ported to like 5,000 different consoles and made even more money. And she's gone on to make even more games and remade other games that she's done in the past. And I'm just so glad that this success story, it's so many years in the making, finally got there. I think somewhere they did have a comparison of like what the original looked like compared to the first remake. And if you can see, compared that to the second remake, it looks totally different. Here we are. They do look very visually similar, but from what I can tell, a lot of changes to the stories, the environments and everything were made. And this now explains why all the environments were so lush and populated with things. It's because it was taking on an already established project and just going, I'm going to flesh it out and make things bigger. I can understand why the open world is so fucking massive. As you can see, literal comparison here between the same area. The difference is adding even more graphical details and even more little things around. Also makes sense why there's so many fleshed out animations, because as you can see here, the comparison is there is no animation whatsoever for Miranda turning into a demon. Also intriguing to see, it was already quite visually impressive at this state, this in-between state. If anything, I thought this animation would have been added for the enhanced edition, but no. Also, it seems that the original version didn't have unique sprites for the enemies, and it was just using kind of basic ones like this little dog. This little dog is adorable and I miss them. I'm curious also what changes might have happened to the battle system, because what does lazy mean? Is that the equivalent of like auto mode? Did they call auto mode lazy mode in the fan translation? Also, rather interestingly, it seems that Bad Luck may either be a transgender person or just for some reason was using a male name early in development. Because I found an early review of the first Ara Fell game, and I'm going to try and show minimal screenshots of that because it does use different pronouns and different name for the creator. And as far as I can tell, this was not a game that switched creators at any point, so it is the same person. I can't find anywhere of a developer like talking about being transgender. So yeah, Bad Luck, if you are a transgender woman and you've made a wonderful game, I'm really happy and proud of you. If you are not a transgender woman, it was just a pseudonym, I'm sorry I've made this misunderstanding. Don't go taking this as any kind of factual proof, okay? I do not know this developer more than they know themselves. But just if you do happen to be transgender, I'm a transgender person too who's reviewing this, and I really love your game. And you're an inspiration to us all. From what I could read into this review, there's a little bit of insight into the plot differences that happened between this early version and the remake. From what I can tell, from the remake onwards, the story has stayed the same. It's just been fleshing out, like adding additional side plots, adding an additional epilogue and things like that. But it seems like there were some quite big changes between the first and second versions. The town that Lita lives in is called Auradorn in this version. And the introductions seem to be totally different. Instead of you starting out playing through the dungeon together with Adrian and finding the ring, you just wake up in your bed like from Chrono Trigger and you find out Adrian found a ring off screen and he gives it to you, and then you get the destiny and everything. The game actually starts with the archery contest rather than it being at the end of this tutorial dungeon. I think that's really intriguing. Also, it seems that the three elf spirits we foreshadowed really early on appearing before you even meet your protagonist in a cutscene before the game starts. That's intriguing to see. We've played so many games in this marathon which started off with like a really big lore dump out of character right at the beginning. It's interesting to see one that's originally started that way and then changed it in the remake. I definitely think the way it does go in the remake is like one of the best introductions I've played of any game. It is a really great mix of starting in medias res and also still giving you enough information to know what's going on. And it's what I said about, it's good when a game immediately gives you a hook. The game throws you right in, you don't know what's going on, you don't know where you are, you just know you're in a dungeon with two really endearing characters, and like you're excited every screen to see their next bit of dialogue where they'll slowly and gradually reveal more about the setting they're in. And then at the end of the tutorial you get the big plot twist, you get the magic ring, and then you get fully thrown into knowing here's the actual context of what's going on. It's a really well delivered way of dealing with both an in medias res introduction and also not making you wait too long to find out what actually is the medius of the res. Also, it seems at this state, Adrian knew that the dungeon he was going into was actually somewhere dangerous and special. It says he found the ring by sneaking into the Holy Land. which in the final version you only find out that the tutorial dungeon was actually more important much later in the game as an actual plot twist. Oh, interestingly, this paragraph does refer to the hometown as Aloria, so I guess maybe it was just like the home country has a different name. In the final game, I don't think it ever mentions what country Aloria is in. It actually says there's only 3 towns in all of Ara Fell. It's actually quite a small area. And that's like an ongoing like lore thing in the background. It's like, there's barely any people left in Ara Fell. We're slowly running out of like resources because when they lifted the continent into the air, it could only take like so much of an amount of resources. We're running out of water. We're running out of all these things. Humanity is growing smaller and smaller, and that's why it's like we have to do something about the vampires and find a way to like find more resources. And then I suppose that's why in the ending is supposed to have a bit of hope, because the situation is pretty grim in the ending, but at least it does give hope of fixing the problem that was plaguing Ara Fell throughout the entire thing. Interestingly enough, instead of a stone curse, it was turning everyone into solid ice. Doran is also described as being a prophet from the Orlean Temple who managed to escape the curse. Then in the final version, he's a wandering bard who used to long ago be from the Orlean Temple, so maybe that plot point was a reference to his different setting he originally had in the original. Also interesting that it seems like the order you gain a party members is different. You get Doran first, then Seri Kezu last, whereas in the final version, Doran is the last one you get. Also, there was actually a name for the kind of destined chosen hero that Lita is. In the final version, it's just like, oh, the chosen one, Diane's ring, and they specifically point out how it's not a prophecy to say a certain people will be the chosen one. It's whoever picks up Diane's ring will become the chosen one. In this, it seems that she was prophesied to be the mythical slayer. So again, it's interesting to see, like, maybe these changes were made deliberately to subvert things that were in the original, but because we now can no longer actually play the original, we don't have any context for it. Also, as mentioned here, and also in the blog post, it seemed that you could originally switch weapons between any character. Lita would have both a bow and a spear, and also be able to use her bombs in battle instead of just in the overworld. And that's interesting. But it does seem like it is a bit much. I do prefer the final version where each character has their own like preset character class, and you still do have a really good amount of customization through it, but it's just like between several different builds that you could go for it, rather than just being insanely ambitious and incredibly open. I love this line from the review. It says that Lita has become almost the face of all female heroines in all of RPG Maker. I love that. She really is like one of the best, most refreshing protagonists I've played in the whole thing. More information on the weapon switching. It seems that everyone has one melee and one ranged weapon, instead of what it seemed to imply before, which was like every weapon. I do think that actually does work quite well, but it says that, does get a little bit of insight into the reason it was removed is because it was just like some enemies cannot be hit at all unless you have a certain weapon, melee or ranged, and it was just a little bit annoying. I do understand that. Also, it seems it probably would have made Seri Kezu overpowered because she has magic which can do both. Also, I have no idea the context of this, but it seemed at some point you're going to be flying in a hot air balloon. This does not happen at any point in the final game. Yeah, I'm curious to the context of this. Like, would we be like moving off Ara Fell, going somewhere else? It apparently had Drake slimes from Dragon Quest. What? So yeah, that's all we know about the early version. This was a fun little diversion to finding out even more about this game that I didn't know. I'm even more impressed now. Guess I just found a copy of Legend of Dear Setsu Hollow. We're not done. It never ends. It never ends. For obvious reasons, I cannot say of which piracy website this is on, but just hypothetically, if you're sailing the Seven Seas, look for a German website which may or may not look similar to this. Also, just saying, if the actual game developer does want to like release the earlier versions of the game officially anywhere, like I would love for more people to be able to see it. But I do understand. Obviously, sometimes you don't want people to see your earlier projects, and I'm sorry that I'm looking at it. But it's because I love the game so much, and I'm sure I'll love it too. But this video is already getting immensely massive, so I'll be moving all of that to its own separate video. For now, early preview / conclusions. Understandably, logically, expectedly, it's not as good as the final game. There are some interesting differences, there are some baffling differences that I'm really glad were changed. But look forward to that soon. As for now, we're closing the book on this game. I love it, it's great, it's really captured and just shimmied my brain around, and I need to stop before I die. Bye bye!